Hey, good morning from the office.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. We got a little different look here this morning. BKP got the B team. He called Bruce and Rick to sub in for him while he's doing a little stint over in Pickens County. So, it's always a little unnerving when Brian calls and he says, I'm the hardest working guy in North Georgia, and I'm going to need two of you to take advantage of or take over for what I do.
Blow and smoke.
So anyway, Bruce and I will give you a couple of the best 2 hours we can come up with. We'll see you again on Friday. We are part of the All-Star panel, but this morning we are live here in the office. North Georgia's only live online morning show, and we're happy to be here. Let me tell you how to get a hold of us if you'd like. You can always reach us at the hotline here, 24/7, 706-889-9700. On Instagram at FYNTV, at Fetch Your News. And you can tweet us at Fetch Your News or at FYNTV. And subscribe to our YouTube page, FYNTV, Fetch Your News. You'll get a little blast back that you remember, and you'll get everything that we're putting together here this morning. I hate to start the show with bad news, but everybody looks forward to their lottery ticket showing up, and they won't have to show up for work. But as you can see, Bruce and I are here, so obviously we didn't win it, but it is being reported that somebody in South Carolina was a
single
winner.
Ticket winner.
Yeah, a single ticket winner. Now there's 44 states that are involved, so some of them hadn't reported in yet. There might be multiples, but at this point in time,
it could be election fraud. But
South Carolina, and I will just give you the happy totals. The winning ticket was 5, 28, 62. 65, 70, and the Powerball is number 5. Again, number 5. So if you've at least got the number 5 Powerball, you double your money.
I got all 6.
You get
wrong.
You get $4 back. Anyway, we're gonna get around the board today. We're gonna start the show off probably with a little news on our thoughts about the gubernatorial race debate last night
Here in Georgia.
Yeah, 3 candidates. We got Ted Metz,
Libertarian
candidate.
Miss Stacey Abrams.
Democrat. Yeah, was it Miss or Mrs.? He kept calling her
Miss. He called her everything. So.
Yeah.
But Stacey Abrams.
And then we've got the Republican candidate, Brian Kemp. So we'll touch on that as we go. We'll cover a little national news later. We'll get to get our latest caravan support report. Where do they show up? How do they get there? Who's paying for it? Wouldn't you love to know who's paying for that thing? Who the handlers are? Anyway, we'll
get into that.
Yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit. And Bruce and I just with our wives just got back from a really nice trip in Europe, and we can maybe
talk about that.
Yeah, talk about that for a few minutes, and then I thought at the end of the show, we're heating up. We were a week away from the announcement of the top 4 candidates for football.
CFP.
Yep, national championship. So thought we'd have a little fun, talk about that. Talk about Josh. Josh is at the helm this morning. We're happy that he's here to guide us through these dangerous chicanes as we traverse the FYN market. Glad everybody's with us this morning. So, Bruce, why don't we kick it off a little bit with just some general thoughts on the debate last night, sponsored by PBS Public Broadcasting, and
where do they get their money?
From you and myself. That's who.
Okay.
Public broadcasting.
Well, they called it a debate, but I don't know. I mean, there was so much rigging on that thing last night; it looked like a triple master. I mean, it was a very funny setup. We talked about it, we saw it, and just the way the moderator was, and the questions, the way they rotated, and the rules. It was not really done that well, in my opinion. And it seemed like there were a lot of softballs thrown at Ms. Abrams and Metz. They just sort of let him go off on his own, and he rambled all over the place. We'll touch on a few things he said that were of interest. And then Brian Kemp seemed to get the harder questions that had to do with economy and, you know, costs and how do you pay for this and how do you pay for that. So it was it wasn't done as well as I think it could have been.
Well, Lisa Rams,
the moderator, just seemed really ill prepared. When you see these debates on national television, they're at least set up a little bit better. They give you an idea of what the ground rules are. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the last minute, she said, "Oh, by the way, the ground rules can be found on our website." You know what? Yeah, and then
if I'm going to watch the debate, I'm not going to go to the website.
Yeah.
So just give me an idea.
And she pulled the moderator privilege card at a couple of points. She says, you know, as a moderator, I'm going to jump in when I feel it's appropriate.
Yeah. And to that point, Stacey Abrams never ran out of time.
Hey.
The other guys are getting cut off left and right, and she doesn't run out of time. Anyway, to Bruce's point, you know, it just seemed like it was the softball questions were set up.
And we had a fire alarm, too. At one point, Mr. Metz was answering something, and a fire alarm went off in the studio.
Out, what was that?
Yeah, what's that noise?
That was hysterical. Bruce and I were out last night, and we had an event that we had to go to, so I recorded the show. We came back and, you know, took copious notes and watched the whole thing. And both of us came away. You obviously knew what the talking points were from Stacey Abrams' standpoint. You know, Medicaid expansion, voter suppression, and voter suppression.
Yeah.
And voter suppression.
Yeah.
What was the one thing that glaringly, well, there were a couple things that weren't talked about, but who was never mentioned in the entire 1 hour?
Donald John Trump. I think his name got mentioned in a few of the responses, but by and large, the Trump effect was totally ignored. I mean, his impact on the race locally here in Georgia, as well as nationally with some other races, didn't even happen. So
by design.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, by design. This guy is so popular, Trump that is, in Georgia. And a couple of days ago, he tweeted out, you know, support again for Brian Kemp. He backs him 100%. They stayed away from that like the plague.
Yeah. It was interesting to behold.
Yeah. What else stuck out in your mind about?
Well, I think Kemp seemed to be on the defensive a lot because some of the questions given to him were more like fastballs because they kept hammering away on voter suppression and this whole thing with the 53,000 people that were put on the voter registration rolls by the group that Stacey Abrams started, was involved with the starting of it. And she says she has nothing to do with it now. But they had canvassers go out into the neighborhoods and register people to vote. And the problem has arisen that they didn't fill out the forms correctly. They didn't get all the details. And Georgia has a very good system for matching information on these forms with the databases for your driver's license or Social Security. And unfortunately, trying to match these things up after the fact has just taken an inordinate amount of time. And Stacey Abrams thinks it's a huge plot against her. And, you know, it's sort of the pot calling the kettle a color. And it just, she was involved with creating the issue, and now she's blaming Kemp for not, handling it in a correct amount of time. So,
I mean, that whole thing was by design. It's no secret that they had all these canvassers out there being paid for the number of paper applications that they brought back, most of which were not even accurately filled out. So consequently, You've got this stack of papers that the staff has to go through to try to make hide nor hair of what they're doing. And incidentally, Stacey Abrams, didn't she vote against the
online voter registration
registration?
Yeah.
which surely would have made it easier.
And yeah, I mean, I registered in person, but the online voting system, as it's been described, seems very, very straightforward and simple. I mean, and they went through the whole debate, and then at the very end, Ms. Abrams said, well, there's places where there's no broadband. I mean, really? Everyone's got a cell phone. You can walk into a coffee shop that's got Wi-Fi. I mean, it's not that big a deal, I think, to get online.
Yeah, for her to sit there and say that they couldn't get registered because there's no broadband is absolutely one of the most I mean, I laughed out loud.
It's pretty weak
when she said that. I mean, who in the world, regardless of where you go in the community, whether it be the less economic fortuned areas, if you can couch it that way, or
the rural areas,
everybody's carrying a cell phone, folks.
Yeah, farmers and tractors are like doing all their plowing and getting information by GPS. I mean, this is everywhere now.
Yeah.
So
that was just one of the weakest arguments I've ever heard. Yeah. And some of those reporters, some of the softball questions, it was so set up for Stacey Abrams to get. Here you go. What was one of the first questions that they asked her at the beginning of the debate to get that whole thing off the front page?
The burning the flag incident.
Burning the flag, yep.
Back when she was in college.
And all she wanted to do was just say, hey, the governor supported it, and, it was the time. And
getting the Confederate symbol off the Georgia flag in 1992 or 6 or whatever it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, again, was just...
That came and went. I mean, it was
an
like...
An absolute attempt not to talk about it, not to throw her under the bus, but get it off the front page at the beginning of the beginning of the debate. So boom, we're done. See you, wouldn't want to be you.
Yeah, burning any flag. I mean, you think they could have spent some more time on that, or at least asked Kemp his opinion of it, but it never happened. So it came and went very quickly.
Yeah. Let's see. What else did we learn?
Well, it tied into the medical Medicaid expansion, and there was a number of $3 billion tossed around, and this is all tied into the code words access for health, which is sort of code for single payer. I don't know if the $3 billion is strictly just expanding Medicaid, because if it's single payer, it's probably a much larger number than that. So I'm not sure if Georgia's one of the states that opted out of Medicaid back when Obamacare first did.
They are.
Okay.
Yep.
I know from living in Louisiana before that, they did the same thing there, because our governor at the time, Bobby Jindal, said, you get into these Medicaid programs and it's subsidized by the federal government for a certain number of years, but then they start to drop it down, and the state has to pick up the monies that they used to get from the federal government. And, Jindal looked at that and said, 5-7 years out, he said, we're going to have to raise taxes. There's no way we can pay for this because we don't have the money now. So yeah. I think that's a similar situation that happened here.
Exactly, yeah. Metz, Libertarian candidate Ted Metz threw out a number saying it would cost the individual taxpayers in Georgia $13,000.
I think that was Brian Kemp that said that.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah.
She never refuted that, though, did she?
No, there were a lot of numbers floating around that were, out there and then never followed up on, or never corroborated, or no, they were never answered.
Well, they were never asked. She was never asked, how are you going to pay for this stuff? When she comes out with the code word...
access for health.
Access for health, again.
For hardworking Georgians.
Yeah, that just means single payer.
Which means hardworking Georgians will be paying for a lot of people that aren't contributing one thin penny.
Right, exactly. And let's see, where else did they go? There's 5 takeaways from the debate. Voter suppression, we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Allegations, took center stage. Some of the reports say Kemp skirted around the issue, wouldn't resign as I thought that was a good point. They've been hammering him for having the ability as Secretary of State to monitor how the voters attempt and are allowed to vote.
Setting up that there's a conflict.
Yeah.
Because he's Secretary of State and he's running for governor.
Right.
And how can the vote be, valid if the Secretary of State office is approving, the vote at the end of the day?
I thought it was a good response though when he said Kathy Cox, who was Secretary of State, did the same thing, and she was running for governor at the same time. So I thought that was a pretty good, solid, succinct
And he
answer.
made the point that most of all of it is controlled at the local election board level in the counties or the cities.
Yeah,
and it isn't something that the Secretary of State office for the state gets involved with.
Everybody reports in to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State just reports what they get from the counties.
Right. It's validated and verified at the county level.
Yeah. So the other thing that kept coming out was the immigration issue.
Documented and undocumented.
Yep. He kept coming. Kemp kept referring to the comments Abrams made at a campaign stop where she said, "The coming blue wave will include both documented and undocumented immigrants." And they make the point conservatives have seized on the comments to accuse her of encouraging illegal voting. What you say?
Yeah, she just sort of slid over that. I mean, he asked her that a number of different ways at different times, and she just sort of slid over that and kind of shifted the response to voter suppression, and people who should be allowed to vote. The system makes it too hard with all this contention about the votes that didn't get registered properly. The Secretary of State, Mr. Kemp, has created an atmosphere of fear. People are afraid to vote or register. I mean, it's just really stretching it.
That is the Democrat dog whistle. Fear. You're going to hear fear so many times over the next 2 weeks, it's going to scare you. You're going to be feared.
We know at the national level, they're already throwing that at Trump, saying, he's a fearmonger.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And that comes to the caravan situation. He's throwing fear into everybody. I kind of remember when they showed a likeness of Paul Ryan pushing somebody off the side of the cliff in a wheelchair.
Grandma over the cliff.
Yeah, that wasn't fear. Man,
that was a pretty nasty commercial.
Yeah, it was absolutely nasty. Okay, we touched on the immigration thing. Candidates didn't hold back from personal attacks, one of the 5 takeaways. Abrams and Metz both accused Kemp of shady and unethical behavior, while Kemp hit Abrams over her lack of paying her taxes.
Yeah, and she kept going back to she never really said, I didn't pay my taxes, although she did say, I'm on a program now to pay my taxes, so it's kind of there in the weeds, folks, but she obviously didn't pay her taxes, and she kept saying that her parents needed cancer treatment, so that was a priority.
Her father.
That she paid for the father's cancer treatments. There was some allegation about Brian Kemp about a $500,000 loan that basically was alleged he was personally responsible for. He explained that by saying he was in a company that he owned 8% of, and
right.
It was a corporate loan issue, and I don't really know the status of that, but that seemed to be a very logical, straightforward response.
If anybody out there is thinking that didn't happen, I urge you to go to the Kemp website, because it is chronicled in there with footnotes and everything how that whole case came down. And
okay.
He was exonerated. So suffice to say that they're beating him up over that.
We shouldn't forget Mr. Metz. I mean, he said a few interesting things in there. Ted Metz, the Libertarian candidate. I mean, at one point he said, I sort of like the definition or statement from Harry Truman. Politicians are crooks. So
wait! I wrote that down last night.
It's kind of kind of threw that
He
out
said,
there. And,
let's see, I'm like Brian now. Let's see, I got it. Nobody gets rich in politics unless they are crooked.
yeah. Thank you, Harry. Thank you.
You know,
Ted.
there's a lot of rich senators and there's a lot of rich representatives.
It has been said that candidates that win national office, be they congressmen or senators or cabinet people, they typically have a higher net worth when they get out of public service than when they went in. So you can take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, exactly.
He also opened the show right when the fire alarm went off. Mr. Metz had a position that a number of the state agencies should be cut back, trimmed, and one of the reporters asked him, he said, "Well, what are you going to tell the people that are affected by that lose their jobs?" And he says, "Well, they're going to have to find a new job."
Find a new job, cut and dried, spoken like a true libertarian.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that much about the candidate, Metz, but it was glaringly apparent that he had a physical disability.
Yes.
I mean, he was missing his left ear. I did some, I went in and checked it out. He's a Navy vet who, during the course of his career, dealt a lot with things that exposed him to radiation. And he found a spot on his, let me see, his left ear, the one that's missing now, and it was treated for a while. You remember in the debate, he made a lot of references to how we should replace a lot of our cash crops with hemp.
Industrial hemp.
Industrial hemp. I mean, he made a big deal about that. Well, in doing some research, he's also a huge advocate of what they call Rick Simpson cannabis oil. Apparently, Rick Simpson is some guru in the cannabis industry that has developed a cannabis oil that he claims cures cancer.
Interesting.
So
I have not heard of.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but suffice to say, the cancer spread, and he had a huge tumor on the side of his head. He had to go to Emory for treatment, and consequently, the cancer spread down into his body, into his lymph nodes, and so that's why he had to have his ear excised.
The whole ear.
Yeah, and so that should put to rest, what's going on with this guy. Suffice to say, he's a Navy vet. He overcame cancer, and he was head of the Libertarian Party in the state of Georgia, and they went to the National Convention, and the National Convention, always tries to support a candidate for public office. They couldn't find a Libertarian candidate in Georgia that wanted to step up and run for governor.
Wow.
So, he came kind of to the rescue. And, I thought he was formidable. He made some good points.
He was, on industrial hemp, he talked about anything oil can do, hemp can do. And then he went through a laundry list of things that hemp is used for, chemicals, and sort of tied it up with a bow saying, it goes into baby food formula.
Right.
And so he made a few interesting points. On some of the other questions, I think he was a little ill-prepared and, admitted as much on a few. But he brought, I think, an interesting counterweight to the other two, just going at each other on, how much money they spent or owe or pay or whatever. So.
Yeah. What else? Anything...
Well, I think
this thing to death, but
tying the national election into this, and again with no mention of Trump, but the whole fear mongering issue that now it seems after the speech that Trump gave in Houston, where the major networks.
Man, that was a marathon, wasn't it?
Oh boy, it's a long one. But I mean, they fact checked it or lie checked it, as they said, and they had this whole list of things they said were outright lies, and it seems as well that the tag is going to be anybody who supports Trump, aligned with Trump, mentions Trump, is going to be depicted as a liar. And I think that's
we're going to hear that for
bad.
the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, it goes with the fear-mongering issue.
Right. Those are going to be the two Democrat talking points for the next 2 weeks before these midterm elections. They're going to keep hammering fear, and they're going to keep hammering the other, which was lying.
Mm-hmm.
They're already making a big deal about pre-existing conditions, and who voted against it.
Right.
MSNBC comes out with this big graph and shows, who voted against it, and, Ted Cruz is up there among others. So,
well, the whole pre-existing conditions. I mean, you had an earache, 6 years ago, and you got hearing loss. That's a pre-existing condition. How far can you stretch that definition of pre-existing condition? I mean, everybody's got something going on in their body or their medical situation.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was clear. I mean,
that's a dog whistle. I think pre-existing condition.
Yeah, exactly. It was clear in the debate that. Abrams put herself out there as someone that could be a bipartisan, reach across the aisle.
Again and again and again and again.
Yeah, exactly. And what Kemp kept doing was hammering and kind of preaching to his base. He wanted to keep the base support there. So, it's going to come down to thousands of votes. And at the end of the day, it's going to be about turnout. And I don't care what race we're talking about, whether it be the gubernatorial race here, the governor's race in Florida, which has turned into a Donnybrook. It's going to be about
which it shouldn't
turnout.
be. I mean, that one's black and white. Sorry to use the analogy there, but I mean that any Floridian could vote for the mayor of was it Jacksonville? Or Tallahassee.
Tallahassee.
He's under investigation for corruption. They have an FBI agent giving him tickets to some high-end play, who for months now he said, "Oh, I got those from my brother." How could you let someone
he got
like
caught
that
in a blatant lie, and he's really doing a dodge and pony show. There's something going on. BKP and I were talking about. I just don't understand how they're pushing this smooth-talking candidate so hard. And, Brian will probably touch on it maybe next week or toward the end of the week here as we get in deeper. But there's something going on down there that doesn't meet the eye. And, I haven't done enough research to kind of...
There's something going on across the country.
Yeah. Well,
it is like fear-mongering, and, Republicans are soulless. They don't have any heart. And we're going to probably get into that a little bit deeper with the national issue and the caravan. But, they're trying to create this stark difference between, Republicans who don't care about anything but money and making more of it and keeping it all, versus Democrats who want to open the borders willy-nilly and just let anybody who shows up come in. I mean, and that is
globalists versus nationalists.
Yeah, I mean that's just a death knell for this country, in my opinion.
Exactly. You can't have a democracy unless you've got border control.
Well, yeah, you need law and order across the board. I mean, it's not just the border. Once you get here, there's laws people have to.
One of the things that we didn't touch on, which I think was interesting, is that the Georgia economy is doing extremely well. We've been the number one place to do business in the country for I don't know how many years. The Mercedes-Benz came here. We're the Eastern capital for movie making. The state is doing well. Governor Deal did a good job, and it was never asked of Miss Abrams how she would try to continue that trend. Doesn't it just seem
there was
like
one allusion to it? Say she kind of dipped her toe in that. I think in one of her responses, but I mean it was lightly skimmed over. Let's say that they didn't really dive into it very deeply at all. But again, I mean the format I don't think worked well for it. With these reporters asking questions which they knew were hot button issues.
Right.
Again, the burning the flag thing. Well, I was a student at Spelman College, and going down that, I worked on a lot of joint task force on crime, so I'm better prepared than any of the other people standing up here to I'm going, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Anyway, it was interesting. You know, Brian has taught me something that kind of resonates, and I checked it this morning. I get an email blast every day from the Abrams campaign because I signed up for it. I want to know what she's talking about. This morning it was kind of funny. Early this morning, I don't know when these things come out. Probably the same time the talking points do, about
the time you went to bed, they come.
About 4:30 in the morning, yeah. Anyway, it comes out and it says, in case you missed the debate last night, Stacey won. Oh, really? Okay.
Winners and losers.
And they're going to start attacking me again now, so please support my campaign and send more money. Anyway.
And she did it a couple times. She says, you know, she's sort of like, I know my candidate is going to say something about this or this or this. I mean, so
well, that was trying to deflect. She was just trying to, you know, she was trying to cut the legs out from
innovation waivers. I know my opposition is going to say something about innovation waivers, and he never did. So.
That's right. Yep. Again, one thing they never talked about was Trump. They're afraid of this guy. He's popular in this state, and if they'd have brought up his name, it would have been a death knell, I think. But
well, going back to turnout a little bit, I mean, in terms, I think of how well the state's doing and how people are energized about this election. You know, we did early voting because we're going to be traveling on election day, so we weren't going to be here, so we did early voting. And the place where we vote in Fannin County basically said they had, on the first day of voting, they had a record turnout, even higher numbers than the 2016 election.
Right.
And I don't know any split on that with Republicans or Democrats or independents, but they said the highest ever. So I think that's an indication that there is a...
Well, it's being reported across the board. That the
very energized base.
Yeah, Republican base.
Yeah,
and they're leading big time across the board in some of these key states that are going to determine the House and the Senate. So
yeah, maybe one thing my final takeaway, my one little note from the debate that maybe you being a longer term resident in Georgia than I am. She said something along the criminal lines with bonds. And she made the statement, cash bonds criminalize the poor.
Yeah.
Now, this is like people commit crimes, have to pay cash, or
well, they
can you explain that to me?
They don't have the money to get out of jail.
No get out of jail card.
No get out of jail card, so consequently, the underprivileged have to stay in jail longer.
Okay, so if they have to pay cash or they don't have the cash, you know, they're criminalized, but they may be committed a crime anyway, whether they paid a bond or not.
Yeah, maybe you committed a crime, so you know, it's just more liberal doublespeak about
going after that block of
that block of voters,
criminalized poor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway, we're gonna have to endure another one of these debates. I think there's one on November 4th, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. But 2 days before the election, we're gonna see another statewide state debate.
PBS again?
No, I think it's being done by the CBS affiliate.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what
the format and the.
I hope they explain some things a little bit better, but
truly.
We'll see how that goes. Anyway. We beat that horse, I think, till it's about dead in the water. So
no air left in the debate.
Yeah, there's no air left in the debate. I'm sure Brian will have his take on it. You know, he might be able to glean some other stuff. He's pretty insightful on this stuff. He's been a debate moderator several times, and you know, to his credit, he said, you know, if I want to fix a debate, I know how to ask the questions right, and he'll probably tell everybody that was a fixed debate. So. Anyway, Josh, we probably need to make some room here for our valued sponsors and pay a few bills here. So why don't we take a break? When we come back, we'll talk about some national news. We'll talk about the caravan a little bit, and then later on, we're going to touch on some sports stuff, have some fun. So take us to break, Josh, please.